Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome all of those watching on ITV and via live stream and call this December 12th, 2023 regular meeting to order with all board members present. So we do not have a JROTC color guard with us this evening, so we are just going to move right to Trustee Lavender Williams, who's going to do the pledge for us. So I'm going to have everyone stand, please.
Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Please be seated. I'd like to make a motion to adopt today's agenda with items H1 and H2, the external auditor's report to be heard first, and item G6 to be heard at the end of the meeting. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by, Trustee Dr. Whitehurst-Payne. And do we have a second? Okay, second by Trustee Lavender Williams. Okay, let's go ahead and vote. Let's start with our students.
Aye.
Trustee Catoriano?
Aye.
Thank you. And everyone else? Okay, thank you. That motion passes unanimously with the students concurring.
Today's meeting of the Board of Education is a business meeting that is conducted in public, and board members will not engage in a dialogue with members of the audience. Board Bylaw 1025 sets the time limit for public comment on agenda items at 10 minutes per side, pro and con, or 20 minutes total. Speakers will be able to provide testimony at the beginning of the appropriate agenda item or at the end of the meeting for non-agenda public comment. Please listen for your name to be called. Speakers are listed and called in the order received. When your name is called, please come to the podium to speak. Speakers participating via Zoom will be asked to unmute when their name is called. If you are unable to unmute yourself, we will call the next speaker. Please follow along with the agenda so that you know when your item is coming up for discussion. If you would like to sign up for in-person public comment, iPads are available in the back of the auditorium and in the lobby.
Thank you, Ms. Stoltz. We will now consider items H1 and H2, external auditor reports and financial statements. I'd like to invite Dan McAllister, Chair of our Audit and Finance Committee, and Jeffrey Jensen from Crow LLP to the podium to present these items.
It's okay to cheer for the tax collector. Anyway, it's great to be back here, and sorry, do I have to repeat now? No, I didn't think so. But it's a number of seasons of audits that we have worked so hard to do better things for this unified school district, and I'm very proud to be part of it. I think I've told the story before. I grew up in this district. My parents grew up in this district. My parents are retired teachers and principals from this district. So we're into it, and it's a great thing you guys are doing, and I just want to commend you all for doing such a great job. We want to say tonight that things are looking good, things are looking bright, things are looking okay in terms of the audits, and we'll hear from our auditor in just a minute, but I wanted to read three quick little excerpts from the audit. The audit and the Finance Committee have looked very thoroughly over everything that they reasonably should be expected to look over. And things are looking good. The audit firm issued an unmodified opinion, which means that they believe the financial statements present fairly and materially respectful than the financial position of the district. Number two, 6 prior years audit showed up to say that findings and 3 have been fully vetted and addressed from the past year out of the 6, so half and 50% to go. But we consider that positive because it's an end after what they went through in terms of bringing to you their final analysis. Last is really a note that regarding the repeat findings of the ASB. ASB seems to be a hobby kind of situation. It shows up whether you want it to or not. But it's natural how it shows up and why it shows up, because we discuss this forwards, backwards, upside down, to quote a song. But it's amazing to me to read about ASB things, because the team here works very hard to do good work on behalf of not only the students but the Unified School District itself. And I think this is just another piece of what we do. You can read more details here, and we're offering those up, but I would like to call Jeff to the podium to give us his perspective from the auditor's position.
Great, thanks, Dan. Good evening, everyone. I'm Jeff Jensen, a partner with Crow, and it's my privilege to be a part of this presentation for the audit report for the year ended June 30th, 2023. We went through this reporting in significant detail with the audit committee earlier, and we've met with them throughout the year here as we progressed with the audit. This audit is really a year-round process. It starts back in February, and it wrapped up a few weeks ago. So we've been a part of working with your team throughout that time, and I'm happy to report that things went very smoothly, as they usually do with your audit, which is to say that your team, not only in fiscal services, who tackles a lot of difficult tasks of implementing new standards and implementing new ideas that are part of the district, but also working with your site staff and all the compliance areas that we have to audit as well. We found that the teams are all very easy to get along with and provide us the information that we need on a timely basis in order to be able to complete your audit on time as well. So just a couple more things to add to what Dan said. Is a good discussion about audit adjustments. There were no audit adjustments, so the numbers that were provided to us to audit are the same numbers that are in our audit report tonight without modification. So that's always good to bring to your attention. And there were also no uncorrected misstatements. So these are smaller differences that we track them to make sure they don't become a material number. And we don't have any of those to report either. So, there were a few findings and recommendations in the report. I would say that none of them are significant or severe in any sort of nature, but items that certainly everyone can work on and we'll revisit as we move into next year's audit. So again, just to close my comments, the audit went very well. Your financial statements are, you have received an unmodified opinion, which is the type of opinion you want on your audit report. And we had no disagreements with management or difficulties in dealing with management in order to be able to complete your audit. And it'll be filed on time before Friday, which is our filing deadline for getting all of our audit reports to the State Controller's Office. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Trustee Hazen.
Thank you. I'm curious, so in reading the letter that was shared, there's a lot of detail around the ASB control, internal control issues. I'm wondering for the other, it sounds like 3 of the findings of the 6 were resolved, but there are 3 ongoing, ASB being one of them. Can you speak to the other 2?
Sure.
And/or is there reason for any concern about those other 2?
So one of them related to cybersecurity policies, and actually that was something that was, again, discussed at length with the audit committee at the last meeting, which was to say that policies have been addressed and have been put in place. The final approval of said policies are still kind of the process to be done, but the day-to-day business of doing what the policy says are in place. So in theory, that was a continuation for this year, because when we completed this report, that's the status of where those were. Mm-hmm. So that was 2, and I'd have to look back real quick at what the third one was.
Attendance?
I'm sorry?
It looks like attendance was the third.
Oh, so, okay, so, as I might have mentioned, there are a number of compliance areas that are applicable to a district the size of San Diego Unified. As your auditors, we're required to look at least 20% of your school sites every year from an attendance perspective, as well as a number of other compliance areas. Looking at attendance goes as far as looking at absence notes and ensuring that you've properly reported attendance on a daily basis for every student within your district. As you can imagine, that's a very labor-intensive process and opportunity for mistakes to happen, essentially. So for our audit for this year, we had, I believe it was one student that was improperly marked present. So, but unfortunately, the state says if you have a finding like that, it has to be reported regardless of the size. So there's actually no fiscal impact to the district for that comment, but it is required that we did have to put it in place, or put it in the report. And finally, just on ASB, it's kind of in a similar light, right? Where with the number of school sites that you have and the number of ASBs then that you have at all those school sites, I actually think that the district is very proactive in trying to train personnel at the sites on how to follow best practices that are put out for ASB accounting. There's a lot of turnover that happens in those positions. There's a lot of competition for attention on campus. You know, if someone is trying to work with the students as well as, you know, run the day-to-day business of the sites, again, mistakes can happen. And I actually think that the comments that you have for ASB are fairly insignificant from where they could be if the processes that the district is doing now were in place.
Got it. Thank you.
Trustee Whitehurst Bean.
I would just like to comment that both the ASB and the attendance, as a member of the audit committee, we have been monitoring that over the last few years. And I want to commend staff for putting in place training, because if you can imagine ASB's turnover every year. We have a new president, we have a new vice president, we have a new treasurer, and just ensuring that they're getting all their paperwork in right and going to the principal and all the steps that they have to go through. So we asked staff if they would do a regular training session, so that they would capture all the new folks coming in. And even with that, we're still having some glitches, but at least we've taken that step of recognizing that ASBs are fluid. And I know you're over there nodding, yes, because we want to do right by the students, and we want to ensure that staff and that you're doing right for all the students. So that's why we requested that training. So we're aware of that. Just wanted to make you aware of that, Gina.
Thank you, Trustee Whitehurst Payne, and also as a fellow member of that committee, I think also, and I think you mentioned this, is that we need to be aware of, you know, that this is for the students, and we need to try to be able to work with those students, and not all students have a credit card or something to pay for, so that is the reason that there's cash involved, which makes things a little messier, but it also allows those students to be involved in ways that maybe they couldn't otherwise. So we're trying to accommodate and make sure that all of our students can be involved in ASB, which provides a little more headaches for the audit committee, but in the long run, I think it's what's best for our students. So, does anyone else have any other questions or comments? Okay, and I also wanted to thank both of you for your work, and everyone on the committee, because this is an all volunteer committee, and you're just providing your time and energy, and it's very much appreciated. And thank you for being here this evening.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Publicly, thank you.
You need to vote on these items.
Yes, thank you. Okay, I don't think we have any speakers. So let's go, we already talked about questions, so we're going to go to the vote. We'll start with Trustee Cotoriano.
We need a motion and a second.
Oh, I'm just
Second.
jumping ahead, aren't I? Okay, motion and a second by Trustee Whitehurst Payne, second by Trustee Hazen, and we already had our discussion. Okay, go ahead, Trustee Cotoriano.
Aye.
And Trustee Lavender Williams.
Aye.
And everyone else. Okay, motion passes unanimously with students concurring. Thank you so much. Okay, we do not have any reportable actions from today's closed session from General Counsel, so we are going to move to item D2. Dr. Jackson, are there any administrative assignments to report?
Yes, thank you, President Bazo. And this evening, we have two appointments that I'll be making. The first is Principal Dana Middle School, John Bosselman, Thank you for being here. Congratulations on this endeavor. I know you'll be great. And we also have Principal Pacific Beach Elementary, Karen Snitzer. Want to welcome you to San Diego Unified, and look forward to working with you. Those are the only two this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. At this time, I'd like our ASB representative, Imani Poole, from Mission Bay High School, to introduce herself. She's got some fans in the audience. Oh, yes, sorry.
Did we vote on H2 as well as H1?
Yes, it was both items
It was
together.
both items, yes. Thank you for checking, though. Okay, sorry, back to you, and we'd love to hear all about what's going on at Mission Bay High School, both from a social side, maybe some of the academic pieces as well, so take it
Thank
away.
you, Dr. Brown. Hi, everybody. I'm Imani Poole. I'm Mission Bay High School's ASB president. I wanted to talk a little bit about our IB program because it is such a unique and rigorous experience, and it offers a lot of coursework that prepares students for their college experience. Being that right now we have 85 seniors, 88 juniors, and 140 sophomores on track to receive their full IB diploma, so we are seeing an increase in interest for that full IB diploma, which is very great. 75% of our upperclassmen have at least one IB class, so they are able to take these rigorous courses and also take other courses that have more interest to them. And then something unique about our IB program is we do offer an IB Marine Science program and an AP Environmental Science program, which are both great due to our location because we are located so close to Rose Creek and we're in walking distance from both the Bay and Pacific Beach. That's great. And then secondly, I'd like to talk about our special education program. We have 2 moderate to severe special education program classes at our school. We offer a sensory room, which is a great resource for not only our students with disabilities, but for anybody to use if needed. And then lastly, we have been able to include our moderate to severe students with disabilities in our ASB program. Mostly this year, we've been able to make homecoming, athletics, and our pep rallies more accessible to them to make sure that they get the experience that everybody else is being able to get. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about our athletics. Congratulations to all our fall sports because they did make it to the first round of CIF playoffs, which was amazing. We have over 50 sports at Mission Bay High School, all very great programs. And then lastly, I just wanted to thank CIF for the flag football. Girls flag football was a big success at Mission Bay, and it was definitely a positive experience for our girls to be able to build just a community. It was great. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Imani, and that was I like how you included a little bit of everything. The IB program sounds amazing, and athletics sounds like you guys are crushing it. And I'm missing the other one. Where was he? Oh, yes, that's amazing that you're trying to, wrap, them in more, and that's always a good idea that we can be more inclusive with our special ed students. So now we usually, because it's getting to be that time of year, we'll sometimes put the students on the spot, but it's okay, no pressure. If you want to share maybe what your plans are for next year.
So I plan to go to college and study political science as my major. I would like to get my double teaching credential in both special education and general education. Wow. That's my plan.
Like Kimberly's out there. She's got money.
We're signing.
She's got money.
So
on the
yes,
dotted line.
it would be great to go to San Diego State, be able to start my credential program earlier while I'm also getting my bachelor's. So that would be the plan. Yeah.
That's awesome. Congratulations. Yes, we'd love to have you back at the district. Okay, so thank you for sharing that information. And let's see, we are now on to the superintendent's information report. Dr. Jackson, please provide your information.
Thank you, President Bazo. I just have one thing, and I know it'll be later in the evening when you discover that we'll be making a change, but at this point, I want to take my report and recognize our president, President Bazo. As our board president, our trustee has really led us and really encouraged us to take up our own leadership around student outcomes-focused governance. And I know this started on your journey as a trustee going out to Harvard, and thank you for inviting me. I hope we can continue to learn together, and I've just seen your leadership grow tremendously. We came in together both with bright, big eyes and wondering what this journey would be on. But I've really appreciated being on this journey with you. you make sure when you are visiting schools, when you're talking to staff, that we're reminded that we need to create conditions for our students to thrive, to be seen, to be heard, and you're grounded because of your own children. And what San Diego Unified has meant to you. As a parent, as a leader, it has been incredible. And I, on behalf of all of us, our staff, I thank you for being our president. The fact that you care for us while taking care of your family, your husband Dave, and your 2 girls, your strength influences me and helps me be a better person. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. Yes, it's been an interesting year, both personally and professionally, but I can say that it's just been an honor to serve in this position. And if you don't know already, we're going to be voting on new leadership at the end of the meeting. And I thank all of you for being along in that journey with me. And just briefly, my first meetings were during COVID, so we had no swearing in, or, well, we had a swearing in, but we had to sneak my husband in, my daughter, during COVID in the darkness. And everything was on Zoom until we had our first meeting, and that first meeting was a doozy, first in person, but from hiring a new superintendent, but it's been an honor, and I really respect and treasure my time here and working with all of you. So, all right, so moving on. We will now hear item E1, which is the first reading of the 24-25 Title I eligibility ranking report. Dr. Jackson, please introduce the item.
Thank you, President Bozzo. Board trustees, tonight we are going to hear our first reading of our Title I eligibility ranking report. And I'd like to invite Tom Liberto up, our Director of Strategic Planning for Student Achievement, to provide a brief overview. Again, a reminder, this is our first reading.
Can you hear me now? There we go. Good evening, everyone. It's really good to see you all again. Appreciate the time. I'm going to quickly go through the process of how schools qualify before we get to the actual recommendation for the allocations of Title I this year. So the presentation is before you. I wanted to start off by saying, what is Title I? A lot of people ask that question. It's dollars that are given to help our most needy students in a supplemental way. And that's what these bullets are talking about. The first one is really important to understand for a follow-up slide that I'm going to get to. The allotments are really allocated by the U.S. Census. There might be some confusion about our LCFF collection process. That's more of an internal process, but the U.S. Census really drives what we receive as a school district in U.S. dollars. They can be used for instructional and non-instructional costs. As I've already said, should be supplemental. There should be no supplanting of anything that we are doing already as a district, excuse me. Sorry about that. So then the internal process is the Title I ranking. And it's really about the free and reduced lunch applications or LCFF collections. If you recall, during COVID, they stopped the meal collections, and we moved directly to LCFF. This year, we did have 2 newer schools that haven't been identified yet to be able to use the LCFF, and so they did meal applications, but for the most part, we're doing the LCFF collections. And again, that's an internal process to find out who qualifies, which school qualifies for Title I, and that's the bottom part of this slide. So you see the progression we're making. Of course, I think last year when I stood before you, I said we'd love to be at 100%. We're not there yet, but we're definitely trending in the correct direction. And so last year, we were at 56%. This year, we identified 58% of our students. Now, the reason we want that number to be bigger, again, is not to bring more money into the district, but we want to be as accurate as possible of where our students are. And so there's a misnomer out there. Matter of fact, I just talked to a principal yesterday does it really benefit me to get 100% of my forms in? And I said, absolutely. And they said, well, then I'm going to have a bunch of students that don't qualify and it's going to lower my percentage. And I said, no, it has to do with your complete population. And so if you get 100% of the forms, you might capture some students that we wouldn't normally capture. But if you don't get the forms, there's no way of doing that. It's only going to raise your number. So I think it's really important for us to understand. And we are doing a much better job supporting schools, and the schools are doing a stellar job of trying to get this information back. Here are some of the guidelines for spending. I'm not going to read them to you, but again, they're very supplemental in nature, no supplanting. The bottom line is probably one of the most important. Does this categorical funding allocation help us reach our SPSA goals? Every school has a SPSA plan. There's goals in there, and these dollars should be supporting that plan. Now, what has changed? Unfortunately, we are receiving less from the federal government than we have in previous years in Title I. So you look at this last year, we were at 39.8%. This year we're projected, 39.8. We are projected this year to receive 37.3. Quite honestly, we didn't see that coming in years past, what they told us we were going to get, and they always kind of do a projection and then the monies come later. They've always been on target, and this year it fell a little short. So when we obviously inquired why are we getting less money? Their direct response was written right there. It says the difference has to do with other districts that had increase in the U.S. Census Bureau poverty counts above what San Diego Unified did. So we're growing, but they're growing faster in their student population that's qualifying. The pot of money is the same, so they're distributing more to them. We're getting less. One of the recommendations, that second section, is that we're recommending we discontinue the supplemental allocation. That was resource code, if you're familiar with it, 3106. A little history on 3106. About 5 years ago, we were providing a lot of services to schools, and we housed the money centrally. But we decided, this school may need that, but that school may not need that. So let's pull those dollars out of the central fund, redistribute them back out to schools, give them more flexibility, more control over what they're spending for their needs. We put that in 3106 because we weren't sure if we were going to be able to continue that. And so it was kind of a pilot, not a pilot for different goals for the money or anything that we were trying to address. The goal was always just to get more money in the hands, but it was more of like an accounting pilot, like let's put it separate so that if we can't continue it, then we can pull that back. Well, I'm happy to say after 5 years of piloting, we're confident that those dollars aren't going anywhere. We're going to continue to be able to put them in. So we're consolidating 3106, the supplemental, with the base program that every school gets. So in that 3100, schools will see a much larger amount than they've seen in the past because it's combined. So the pilot program was for 5 years, and the total supplemental is $8.2 million we were able to find centrally to push out to the school sites. And the last section talks about what the allocation in 3100 is going to look like. So every school will only get one allocation this year, in addition to the parent involvement, which is a 1%, and it's required. So that's staying the same. But it's going to be a total of 23.7. So we were doing 15.5 million in the base. We were doing 8.2 in the supplemental. We're combining that, so schools in their base will get 23.7 this year. This is just a graphic that I'm not going to spend a lot of time in, kind of shows where the dollars have been going historically. So I think it's orange, but in the orange column, that's before the 18-19 school year. So our allotment was 38 million or so from the federal government. We were putting 15.5 in the base, and we didn't have a supplemental at the time. And so 22.5 were going to the central services that I had talked about and we had reevaluated. Then in 18-19 is when the supplemental pilot came out, and that's where we split that. It was 38 to 40 million in that range. We were still putting the 15.5 in most years, and then the 8.2 in the supplemental. You notice that there's a little parentheses there. If you recall, during COVID, when we weren't collecting as many forms and lots of schools dropped, we inflated that 15.5. We said, well, we need to put a little bit more. A rising tide lifts all boats, and so we had to do that. And we couldn't be strategic. We couldn't say that school didn't collect very much, so we're going to give them more. It has to be equal in that formula. And then by doing that, we were spending at about $14.3 million in Central. Our recommendation for this year and beyond, that's hence the question mark, the allotment is going down to $36 million, but we are going to combine those two and do 23.7, which will result in approximately about 12.3 million for Central. So obviously giving more dollars to the schools seems like the direction that we want to head. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're measuring that in the future, but this gives a systematic over the years where the dollars have been allocated. I want to give you a couple of examples. So Title I is based on 40% or more in poverty. The approximately 23.7 will be allocated to sites this year. At the 99% mark, our dollars per student is 641. That went up from like the low 500s to the 600s because of the combination of those two resources this year. There is a decrement system which the board has approved for longstanding, where for each percentage below 99 percentage points, we drop $5.50 off of that 641. I believed the strategy behind that is studies have shown where there's a higher concentration of our most needier students, they need more dollars per student to address those needs. And so I wanted to show you the examples. We have two schools. I just pulled these at semi at random. I wanted to find schools that had similar population number-wise. So I took Fay Elementary, which is 461 students, Miller Elementary, which is at 434, and showing you the percentages. So Fay is at 96%. That's only 3 percentage points lower than the 641 at 99. So they're getting $624.50 per student times the 461 for an allocation this year of about $289,000. Takes the similar school, similar size, but coming in at 67%. That's, I can't do that math in my head this quickly, but it's down from the 99, drops that percentage or that amount per student down to 465. So when you multiply that times the 435 qualifying, it goes to 201,000, about 202,000. So that's the philosophy behind the report. And then you do have the attachment with the report in there that goes, we call it a ranking report on purpose. It goes from the highest qualifying schools down to the lowest qualifying schools by level. So you have elementary first, middle, and then high school. And that's what the report looks like. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about next steps. This is a 30-second slide. We understand that this is a lot of money, and we're giving it out to the school sites. And we have done different degrees of measuring the impact of that. And we want to be more strategic about, is it making a difference? I think if you talk to principals, which I am in the midst of collecting some testimonials from principals about the good things they're doing with Title I. But if you talk to them and you say, hey, would you like more money? I mean, which principal wouldn't say yes, right? They'd say yes. But then when you say, what kind of impact is it? Again, we've kind of been in different degrees of measuring how well that's doing. So we want to, in my department, develop a defined system to be able to look and say, School A got this amount of money, this is what they did with it, did they make gains? And have that captured so that we can make some informed decisions in the future. Now, this is a yearly cycle, so it's going to take a little while for us to get completely proficient in that process, but it definitely is our goal. And so we're working very closely. I'm super excited about the redesign, if you will, of my department, because as I've told you, I think before in a board presentation, we're sliding up next to principals and planning SSC meetings and looking at data and looking how they're spending their money, things that we've never been able to do before, but now because of the realignment, we're able to spend those, and that's where we're starting. We're taking a real deep look at how is this money impacting. So with that, I would be more than happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Tom.
Yes.
Do we have any questions from anyone? Nope. Trustee Barrera.
Thank you, President Bowser. Thank you, Tom. Great, clear presentation as always.
Thank you.
Do we anticipate this year that we'll have any schools that will be significantly negatively impacted and kind of how are we supporting those schools?
So there are three factors that are contributing to that. The quick answer is yes, unfortunately, there are schools that are dropping. But we kind of saw that coming when we went from the 15.5 up to, I think this year's 19.4. I mean, that's $4 million more than we historically have allocated. And thankfully, we were able to do that. With the reduction from the CDE of almost $3 million, the decision was made to go back to the 15.5. So that's one of them. We're not allocating as many. However, over time, and you all know this too, our city is changing. Some communities where we've had pretty high concentration of title, it's even difficult for families to live there now, you know? And so they're moving out to El Cajon or farther east or north or wherever there might be. So our percentages, the second factor, those are changing too. We've seen some changes. We don't believe it was from the collection. As you saw, we collected a lot more data than we ever have. But the raw numbers are coming in that the poverty level isn't as high as it was. And then the third one is enrollment drop. We do have quite a few schools that relatively came in the same, but they're projected 150 students less. When you take $640 per student at 150 students, then that affects. So we do believe that it's a true drop. It's not either a mistake in the system or something that we're not thinking of. It's just kind of where they're landing. So again, as a whole system, I think we're starting to talk about how those things are. We presented to principals yesterday what the numbers would be. They're starting to be very strategic about how am I going to fill this gap. Again, my team is there working very closely with them. Well, let's look at the data. Maybe where we were putting money in, it wasn't affecting, so let's look at a different way that we might have a bigger impact on that. Lots going on there. Yes?
Trustee Hazen.
Thank you. And I have a few questions. So one is trying to understand, and I really appreciate the next steps you've mapped out in terms of understanding the impact of, frankly, significant Title I dollars. Are they making the desired difference for students experiencing poverty? So on slide 4, we talk about all of the guidelines. And so I'm curious, do you have any sense currently about whether our strategy to set a threshold of schools with 40% of poverty or more, of providing more dollars to sites versus central office, do we have a sense of the impact of both the strategy and of any of the investments, or do we really not quite know?
Yeah, I really wish that I could give you a solid yes, that we have it in a package. A lot of it's anecdotal. Through the DAC, the District Advisory Council, if you remember, we had a repository of information about how schools are doing, and we added some schools to that. So working with the area superintendents, there was a look about a year ago where schools that were making progress and spending their Title I money. The problem is if it was easy, and I know you're not saying this, but if you're saying, hey, just put your money here and you'll get a growth. Everyone was doing that, and we would see growth all over. There's lots of different factors at our area super, site leadership, teacher retention, all those types of things. So I wish I had here's the package. I don't have that yet. That's what we're building, and it's going to take a little bit of time to do that. So appreciated the talk we had the other day because it really sparked some of that thinking, and we went into action, and we're putting the wheels in place.
Appreciate that. I'm also wondering, so the recommendation is that there's this $2 million decrease in Title I funds, and the recommendation I'm hearing is we want to take that away from what had previously been used by sort of central office and send that to schools. And I'm wondering if you can tell us why that's the recommendation.
So there would be the best way to describe it, 2 buckets of money, site money and central money. The site money, we've been increasing to address the impacts of the COVID, right? So we were at 15.5 going up. This has been going down at the same time. with the loss of, and it's almost $3 million that they're taking, what we decided, the team that's been working on this, is to go back to the historic pre-COVID levels. So even though we're still reducing back to the level we've been giving for 5, 6, 7, longer before I was even in the position, the level that we've been giving, whereas Central is still going. The team is still looking at this and saying, where can we make some reductions and hopefully push some of this from this bucket into this bucket, but at this point, the levels where we've landed, that's been our recommendation.
Yeah, I guess if someone could share a little bit more about the why, because you could do anything, right? We have so much latitude about how we spend the money, how we distribute the funds, what the threshold is, and so presumably a lot of, when we saw that there's $3 million less, that was a surprise, and lots of thought went into where are we going to take that $3 million from?
Yeah, and I can speak to this, and Tom and I, we've talked about this, but fundamentally, our why is really built from the concentric circle model, where, and that's the foundation of LCFF as well, is putting the dollars closest to the students and allowing school teams, communities to make the decisions that will best meet the needs of our students. And then holding them accountable for that. And I think that it sounds like you and Tom had a conversation about that, like, how are we spending the money? What are the results that we desire, and are we getting those results, and how are we making those shifts? Much like we've been talking at the board level. And so that's a fundamental principle, is that's where it's the strongest, where site leaders working with their school teams, including parents, including students, are making the decisions based on the data that surrounds them. Because as much as, we like to think of us being, hey, we're school systems, talk to every principal, they'll say, we're unique. That was a little bit of a funny for all this. But it is true. They are unique. And yet, I think Vice President Hazen talks about this. We can also pay attention to where there's promising practices, and then we can work to replicate those.
Right.
So that's our basic principle in terms of leadership and organization, is how do we get more to the schools to allow them to make the decisions and then track the results. I don't know if that's your question,
Yeah,
but
I mean, I think, that answers
why.
the why. I think it's challenging for me. So philosophically, it makes sense. I agree, right, getting dollars closest to the students, and, that makes a lot of sense, but we have nothing, it's challenging for me when we have nothing that shows this was our SPSA goal. We
Yes.
put these Title I dollars behind meeting this goal specific to students experiencing poverty, and we saw these results. And because of that, we're going to send more money to sites.
right.
So nothing shows me that, and so I think it's just challenging, and so I think moving forward, the more we can share promising practices or evidence of the difference it makes, because I think for me, as I'm learning about all of this, it sounds like we set this threshold, this 40% threshold. And I'm trying to understand, is that arbitrary? How did we land there? Is that right? If we know, I think to Tom's point, that schools with the highest concentrations of poverty need more dollars per student to be able to achieve significant impact, if that's true, does it make sense to set the threshold higher? So I think
Great
all of
point.
these things are in my head, and so just trying to understand, and I guess also, to your point along the lines of promising practices, I'm wondering, I think you're coming back to us January 9th for us to approve this. Is there any guidance we should be providing to sites about not limiting the use of funds, but guidance about where the dollars are going to make the most impact? Because right now, I think by design, there's a lot of flexibility, and I guess what I'm asking is that right or not?
I think that's a great point. I think the general guidelines have been provided. I think we can do a better job of making sure, and I think this is happening, Tom mentioned the area superintendent, sitting side by side with principals, really talking about the goals, and then doing a review of that,
Right.
Checking in regularly. And that's what we want our SSCs to do that. We want our governance teams to do that. And so I think the answer is yes. Are we doing it at this moment? I don't know that I can say we are.
Well, that's one of
as
the
a
things I
whole
want to
scale.
talk about related to
Trustee
Lincoln. Lincoln Cluster, that's one of the things that we set out to do this year. We started with Lincoln High School. They came to the cluster meeting, and they presented where they are, what are their SPSAs, how do they relate, how are you spending your money, what's going on. The last time we had a couple of schools, Valencia Park and Knox, to present. Next time it's going to be Baker and Valencia Park, I believe, are going to present. But we're looking at this issue of you have this money coming in, how are you spending it? How is it making a difference in that, at that school? And not only that, what practices are you using to show that it's making a difference? And how can the other schools in the cluster pick up from that model and try to enhance it? So, it's a microcosm, hopefully, of the district, but we are pushing towards that
Absolutely.
direction in that cluster.
I think it's the process that's most critical, because what I can say, being in this profession for many, many years, you cannot take something that's working at this school and then just think you're going to walk over and do it over here. The dynamic of the community, the data of the students, the leadership, the teaching staff, the parents, but I do agree that having a process to think around this makes a great deal of sense. So we'll make note of that recommendation and as we lead forward.
Thank you. And Trustee Pedersen.
Yeah, I have a brief question. Well, one reflection on the discussion, which is, I had a professor in grad school of social psychology, and he used to say, any study with less than 3 independent variables is so unrealistic, the outcome is not relevant to the real world. And any study with more than 2 independent variables is so infeasible financially that it can't be done. And so, but I'm thinking that in terms of having served on a SSC, the idea that you would be able to create some sort of a causal, even a hypothetical, or much less prove a causal relationship between a Title I intervention and a particular outcome is like, I think if that's what we're operating from, trying to get to, I don't think we're ever going to get there. So I think we have to pull back and think of some other way. And in relation to that, and this kind of goes in the direction that Trustee Hazen was indicating, which is not just about working with site leaders, but in particular, we've talked about this in a lot of different contexts, the challenges around SSCs. And I could be wrong, but there's a sort of perception in various reports we've had that there's some sort of inverse relationship between the social, educational, time-wise, professional ability of student families to participate in SSCs and the level of Title I funds. There's some inverse relationship, and so we have particularly challenging time. We have challenging times even in clusters that are very affluent in retaining a viable SSC that's reflective of parent or community concern. It's even more challenging, as I understand it, in less affluent areas where families have a lot of challenges to be able to participate in that environment. So I guess my question is, what are we doing? This kind of it goes along with what Shane said, to help SSCs have the tools, but also what are we doing to confront the reality of the principals, the site leader, staff, or actually it's more complicated because it's site leader, certificated staff, classified staff. There's some asymmetries there. Parents, to confronting the reality and sort of intervening in a way that is realistic in regard to the actual distribution of decision-making and power to create outcomes that maybe are not thoroughly data-based, but are reflective of the needs of students and the desires of students and their families.
And that goes to a broader question about leadership versus what Tom is presenting this evening. So,
Well, I can tell you a few things that we are doing, and I've shared a couple of times just the transition in my department alone and us being able to focus and working side by side, not only with site principals, but you all charged us a few years ago, the board that was in place, in doing the training and training the SSCs. Now, that's a cyclical, because it's a 2-year term, so it takes us 2 years to basically get out to every school, and then we have to start over because there's new SSCs. But we love to do it because we see the impact. The knowledge of those that are involved in this process just goes through the roof when we're doing that. So we're working with them, the work of the DAC, quite honestly, the reframing there of supporting SSCs specifically. I just emailed a principal right before I came down to the board meeting asking about the DAC meeting tomorrow night, and is it really important if we go there? I sent her a package of stuff, please come, make sure you have somebody there. They're going to receive information that they can bring back to your site. And so when we charge DAC members with going back to the site and going, hey guys, this is what they're talking about the DAC, we're responsible for this, it's just lifting everyone's awareness. We're trying to attack that all around. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Tom. And a second reading and action will be taken at our January 9th, 2024 meeting.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, we will now hear item E2, update on, thank you, bye-bye. Update on restorative discipline practices. Dr. Jackson will introduce the item.
Yes, this evening we have a team that's going to present, share goals and progress data around exclusionary practices, as well as the supports we are offering to impact stronger implementation of restorative discipline practices. And I'd like to welcome Ebony Weathers, our Executive Director of Equity and Belonging, Dr. Michelle Ferreira, how you doing?
How you doing, Doc?
Good to see you. Program Manager for Restorative Justice Practices, and John Ross, who is here, Program Manager of Placement Appeal. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. We're here today to present some updates for you all on our restorative discipline practices. So we're going to try to go, and we've taken a lot of feedback and input around this student outcomes focus, so we really tried to center our presentation today on those student outcomes and student goals, along with some updates around the progress that we're making towards those goals. So we are going to start off with our desired restorative discipline outcomes for students. We've identified 2 of those outcomes, and you'll see those here. Number 1 is that students have access to the maximum number of instructional minutes and days available. Number 2, Black students who are currently furthest from educational justice in relationship to exclusionary practices will experience less disparity in discipline. So those are our 2 larger foci for the year as it relates to discipline. But based on those outcomes, we've developed 2 strong student-centered goals. And so you'll see up here, these will be repeated throughout our presentation as we focus our work around suspension and expulsion and restorative practices on these 2 specific goals. So goal 1 is specifically to decrease the use of exclusionary practices as a form of discipline by lowering our suspension and expulsion rates across the board for all students. And number 2, decreasing the racial disparities among discipline data for our Black students specifically. So essentially, we're looking at 2 separate things here that are really connected. Number 1 is disciplinary data as it reflects on all of our students, and then focusing in deeply on our Black students and how they experience disparity in discipline. We wanted to include, and you can look at Appendix 2, we shared the larger data set that we pulled this from, but this is from the Civil Rights Data Collection in partnership with the ACLU. And we wanted to give just some background on why this work matters so much. We know that instructional time is important. We know that being part of a school community and being connected to peers and resources is integral to student success. But we wanted to give you some concrete numbers up here. So this data report shares the total number of days lost nationally that you'll see at the top there. And then for California, you'll see right below, and we are marked in red because we are among the top 10% in terms of total days lost by students based on out-of-school suspensions. And then you'll see up here just some data points that we thought were important to lift. But students who are suspended are more or less likely to graduate from high school or college, more likely to have been arrested or on probation, less likely to graduate on time or at all, more likely to become involved in the juvenile justice system. So we wanted to put this up here just to share why our goals are so important, because we know that this work matters and it impacts the amount of time that students really get to experience the rich environments that we provide at school. I'm going to turn it over to John, and he's going to share with you just an overview of some of our updates.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is John Ross, the Program Manager for Placement Appeals Department. We've received a lot of feedback from students, staff, and families since the adoption of the RDP in 2020. We've put a lot of effort into making refinements, not only to the RDP, but amping up supports for our proactive and reactive supports for our school sites. We've provided an overview of 8 updates that you can read more about in the attachment 1. 2 updates we'd like to highlight tonight are, 1, we provided sites with proactive discipline supports to every site administrator. That's the first that we've done this year. The second, we've developed the student supports and the safety plan, and we've shared that with every school site, and that's to support students who have suffered harm as a result of an incident committed on their school campus.
Thanks, John. Good evening, leaders. I am Michelle Ferrer. My pronouns are she, hers, and I serve our district as a Restorative Justice Practices Program Manager. I'd like to provide a brief overview of the RJP support we provide our school communities. We continue to offer both virtual and in-person sessions to support all staff in deepening their understanding and building their confidence to implement restorative justice practices. This includes supporting our school teams in the development of school-based restorative discipline plans. As you can see, the first 3 professional learning sessions listed here are part of the RJP, Addressing Harm When It Occurs. In partnership with SDA leadership, we have launched full-day, in-person monthly sessions aimed to support secondary staff who have accepted the RJ release assignment. We refer to our educator leaders as RCLs, Restorative Community Leads. Since the launch of the cohort, our leaders, our RCLs, have attended a 3-day summer workshop and completed to date 3 sessions aimed to support them in their leadership role. We understand as a central office team that it is important to prioritize continuous support, coaching, and modeling of RJ practices, and to work side by side our school communities as we refine the ways we approach discipline so that discipline is rooted in the value of dignity. I'd like to publicly express my gratitude and my deep respect for all the educators and leaders that are doing this restorative work with fidelity. On this last slide regarding RJP offerings, I want to lift up 2 items. The first is our partnership with NCRC, the National Conflict Resolution Center. This year, we've been able to have 2 Tier 3 practitioners that support the central office to respond to schools who might need support or consults on Tier 3 addressing harm processes. Finally, what I would like to lift up is the support we provide to our elementary school communities. In partnership with principals, the Department of RJP continues to co-design customized professional development sessions that happen at the school site. We continue to collaborate and partner with SDA leaders to identify and address some of our elementary school needs and provide support to their own site-based restorative discipline plans. And finally, I'd like to emphasize that this year we have launched an elementary school Google Classroom in order to continue the discourse of restorative practices, but also make sure we are providing support to our elementary schools. Pass the mic back over to John.
So our discipline goals for this school year are, 1, we want to end the school year with 2% or less of all students suspended. So that's a 0.5 decrease by the end of this school year. So if you look at the data on the left, last school year, 2.5% of all students were suspended at least once. Again, we want to end the school year with 0.5% decrease, ending the school year with no more than 2% of all students being suspended. If you look at the data on the right, currently 1.1% of all students have been suspended at least once this year, so we feel like we're on track to meet our first goal Our second goal is to decrease disparities for African American students experiencing suspension by 0.8%, resulting in a 2% disparity by the end of the school year. Last year, 5.3% of African American students were suspended at least once, compared to 2.5% of all students who were suspended at least once, resulting in the racial disparity of 2.8% for African American students. So we figure if we can cut that down by 8%, we will be able to reach our goal by the end of this. 0.8%, we'll be able to reach our goal by the end of the school year. The next slide. Here we're looking at expulsion data for the past 2 years and the current year. If you look at attachment 3, you can see we've significantly decreased our expulsion rate overall. However, the racial disparity for African American and Hispanic students continues to persist. We like to continue to decrease our expulsion rate. Historically, black students have been twice as likely to be expelled. Let's see, goal 1, decrease the expulsion by 25% by the end of this school year. So if you look at the data in the middle, last year we had a total of 49 expulsions. In order for us to meet our goal of reducing that by 25%, we will need to end this school year by having no more than 36 expulsions. Currently, we have 7 expulsions, and so we, again, feel like we're on track. The second goal is to decrease the disparity of African American students experiencing expulsion, and we know that African American students are twice as likely to be expelled. Our goal is to close the disparity gap. This concludes our presentation. We're open for questions.
Thank you very much. And yes, we have some speakers on this issue. And I'm going to just have you all, if you're not already, to come up to the front row, please. And we have Mario Valladolid. We have Valladolid, excuse me. Miko Uhuru, Crystal Hempel, and Reina Martinez. And you'll each have 3 minutes to speak. So we're going to start with Mario and have him come up to the podium.
Good evening, board members. Good evening, Dr. Jackson. And good evening, community and colleagues. My name is Mario Valladolid. I work for the Restorative Justice Practices Department. I've been with this district now going on 19 years, and I've seen a lot. When I came to this district, we were still doing suspensions and expulsions when I was a student in this district. And we were seeing that the number of students that are being suspended or kicked out of school or dropping out was the same level of students that were being arrested and incarcerated in juvenile hall. So I made it my mission to become a part of a team of people in the Restorative Justice Practices Department to be able to basically interrupt the school to prison pipeline, because we have an obligation in our district, because we are the second largest district in the state, but the largest district in our county. For the over 200,000 souls that we are responsible for, we have an obligation to bring people together. In this nation of today, the disparity, people are choosing sides. In restorative justice practices, we are about building community. We're about bringing people together. We're about having people be able to discuss the differences that they have and be able to see the similarities in each other. And that doesn't happen if we don't create spaces where people are able to deal with their conflict in a way that's through talking in discussion rather than through physical contact. I am proud to be a part of this department, and I hope that we continue to grow this, because, again, this is the only way that we're going to be able to do what is right for our young people, to teach them how to talk, teach them how to be friends. I run a circle where I do something but friendship circle. And to all of us, that may seem like that's easy to do. But our young people, maybe it's COVID, maybe it's technology, maybe it's a combination of both, are having a trouble being able to communicate with each other, being able to tell each other the things that they like, the things that they don't like. And through that frustration, not being able to communicate, we have been seeing a lot more tensions in our younger people, as young as first grade. As young as 6 and 7 year olds are having conflict and being able to communicate what it is they like and don't like, and that's causing fights, that's causing kids being sent home. And as you already saw, if we're trying to decrease suspensions, we have to create spaces which we're teaching our young people how to speak to one another, how to be cordial, how to be diplomatic, and not to be violent in nature when there are disagreements. I believe in this nation, I believe in our district, and I believe it's our patriotic duty to create a space in which we bring people together rather than creating divisions. That is becoming very dangerous in our society today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mario. Next, we have Miko. 3 minutes.
All right. Good evening. My name is Miko Uhuru. My pronouns are he, him, and his. And my purpose for addressing the school board is to humanize the misunderstood restorative justice practices. I am in year 3 as a restorative justice practices coordinator at Morris High School. My primary job description includes reinforcing our restorative discipline policy, cultivating trusting and safe relationships, and addressing and repairing harm that affects our Morris community. And the 5 principles of restorative practices are respect, responsibility, relationships, and the forgotten 2 are repair and reintegration. Since I thought my speech was going to be 2 minutes, and I have 3, I'm going to go by memory on the parts I excluded, and I'll make sure I'll be done within the 3-minute time frame. Okay, so part of what the interventions I provide from the Restorative Justice Practice Coordinator is teaching staff and students how to use effective statements, how they can recognize their feelings, so they know that if you're really upset, it's not a good time to start scolding someone or start getting upset like that. Recognize it, pause, recognize what's going on, and address the person later. Maybe you can come to my room or speak to your friend privately, not with a bunch of people around. Even I do that, say that to the adults on the campus too. Because the adults and the kids, they have some similarities in common. We're humans, and sometimes we say things we shouldn't say at the moment. We can say it later when we're more calm. So we do that. We have restorative circles, harm circles, and a lot of communication and apologizing and repairing the harm that we've done later on. So to demonstrate the impact of my RJP role, I have 3 data points to share with you. First data point, in year 1, I completed 293 documented interventions through December, compared to 351 documented interventions completed as of December 8th in year 3. That is a 20% percent change from year 1 to year 3. My second data point, I received about 9 staff requests from our services in December. Usually in year 1 and 2, I usually have 9. So this month is still going on. So as of December 8th, I had 18 staff requests. That is a 100% increase from years 1 and 2 to year 3 just in the first week of December. Okay, my third final data point, from our RJP feedback survey for year 3, a total of 49 responders rated my supports on a scale of 1 to 4. 1 is the lowest and 4 is the highest. My time's up. Okay, peace. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And this is
evening.
Crystal.
Thank you so much. My name is Crystal Heinbohl. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a mother of 2 wonderful children in my cluster. One, Dana, who I'm excited is finally has a principal, thank you, and also at the high school. This is my 21st year of teaching. I've been a sports medicine teacher for a long time, but this year it's been my honor and my pleasure to serve as a restorative community leader at my school for 3 class periods. I also would like to cite that my site is using Title I funds to fund my position, so it's a great connection back for you to see what some of the boots on the ground are doing on our campuses. There's a lot of value that we can bring both inside and outside the classroom. As a school, we're committing to building systems and putting structures in place that can be sustained as we continue to develop and adjust our comprehensive, multi-tiered systems of support in conjunction with our restorative discipline policy. This is our first year at Point Loma, and we are already seeing strides with more students in class and engaged, fewer period absences, truancies, and suspensions, while we move away from the expulsionary practices of the past. I've been involved in monthly professional development provided by Dr. Michelle Ferrer and the Restorative Justice team, and these trainings have provided a collective of ideas and program offerings amongst our school sites, many of which happen to be in various levels of implementation. So I'd like to share some of my successes at my site. My colleague and I have been working one-on-one, as well as hosting community building circles with whole classes of up to 36, as well as smaller groups of 8 to 15 students. We've been working in community circles to include social and emotional needs, academic performance, mediations between students and teachers, and students and teachers, attendance interventions, as well as other groups for specific student needs, like a girls group that I've been running. We presented at our new student orientation to all 400 of our 9th grade and new coming students, and we presented about conflict resolution and the offerings and goals of our program to include building positive relationships within our school community founded in empathy for others, cultivating social and emotional skills for school and beyond, fostering communication skills for prevention of conflict. We want to be proactive, not reactive. Providing conflict resolution rooted in justice, supporting staff and students through mindful and relevant education. These offerings have aided us, in building relationships with our spotlight students. These are the students who may need a little extra guidance, love, and support, who fall on our hard data points that we've been collecting. I'm confident that with the support of our district and the Restorative Justice Practice Program, we will continue to grow and reach more students and see every pointer thrive with pride. I want to give gratitude, love, and light to all of you, and thank you for listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal. And finally, Raina.
Good evening, board members. Good evening, Dr. Jackson. So my name is Raina Martinez, and I am an 8th grade English teacher at Lewis Middle School. I also hold a restorative community lead position there as well. And I'm coming to you to kind of speak from the heart. I'm coming to you to not provide data points, but to kind of let you know where I come from and what I offer this position and my students at school. When I was young, school was not easy for me. I carried responsibilities that gave me no room to succeed. I often came to school tired, hurt, unprepared to start the day. I sat in classes and was invisible. I never had teachers that asked why I slept in class, why I never turned in homework. Never had a teacher sit with me and ask, "Are you okay?" Even though the outward signs were glaringly obvious I was not. So when it was time to decide what I wanted to do with my future, it was easy. I would be the teacher I always needed. I would be an educator that nurtured relationships with kids, getting to know who they were, where they came from, and what they struggled with. Through my years of teaching and working with students from preschool to 12th grade, I have observed the ups and downs of childhood and what effect it can have on a child's performance in school. I have found that loving a child through their trauma results in confidence and a feeling of worth, not embarrassment. For decades, we have been raising our kids through the lens of fear, that if they don't perform, punitive measures will scare them enough to steer them toward a better path. In my 22 years of working with kids, I have seen that punishment, above understanding, has never been successful. As a child, I knew I needed to be treated with dignity instead of shame, but instead felt like I was thrown away by a system that valued performance over humanity. Before restorative practices had a name that was recognizable, I was engaging in the work, not because it was the newest thing, but because it was the right thing. In Oakland, I was trained in the practices we now know as restorative justice and was given the privilege to work with kids to resolve conflict in a humane way. I got to be a trusted adult, helping them understand their success and helping them to advocate for themselves during times of trouble so that they recognized their work. understood their success, and learned to be better versions of themselves. The work was never about a lack of consequences. It was about humane consequences, treating children with dignity and being another adult in their lives that care. As a mother of 4 children, 1 in middle school, 2 in high school, and 1 in college, my biggest hope is that they're happy, feel safe, and have someone that sees them, hears them, and is there for them in school whenever they need it. Thank you.
Thank you to our 4 speakers, and now we are going to turn to the board for questions and discussion. Trustee Whitehurst-Payne.
I want to say thank you to staff for that presentation. I think perhaps you've heard some of the comments that folks have said about how it's not working, that some of the schools are out of control still. I could name a few, but I won't, that it's not working because we have more issues and so forth. But what I really want to applaud all of you for tonight is I really appreciated Miko Uhuru's point, because in addition to the qualitative data, he gave us some quantitative data, which really said to me that it's improving. The first 2 years you had X number and now it's improving. And probably each of you can do that and let us know that because it didn't work in the beginning or it didn't work in year 2, doesn't mean that year 3 and going forward that it won't work. And I think that's a message that we have to carry, because to have 9 and 21, 22, or whatever 2 years, and now you have 18 the first week in December, that's a good statistic. And I really appreciate that, because it says to me that maybe folks are beginning to learn. And I'm sure that some of the other idiosyncratic practices that may not have worked so far, you're finding ways to address them and adjust them so that will work for our students. Because ideally, we can't get to having a reduced suspension rate or expulsion rate if we don't do some of these necessary things that you're talking about, where we can talk. It's not only students and teachers, it's even administrators and community people and central office versus site administrators, where people are just like on the edge. But this practice of sitting down, talking about it, sharing, working through whatever issues, then I hope the whole system will benefit from that. And I just want to say thank you for all of you.
Thank you, Dr. Whitehurst-Payne. And, Trustee Barrera?
Thank you, President Boswell. Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on Trustee Whitehurst-Payne. So your presentation is fantastic, and we know the work that you do every day. And I think Raina just, made the point so clearly that there really cannot be an alternative to the restorative approach, right? We can't go backwards. We know restorative is necessary and the right thing to do. We also know, as Trustee Whitehurst-Payne said, and I think Miko spoke to this, that there's so much misunderstanding, and we hear it all the time. You hear it more than we do, whether it's from students, from educators, from parents, that what restorative means is chaos at school, and nobody feels safe, and there are no consequences. And I'm interested in, at this moment, when we're trying as a district to push forward with the only approach that we know is right and effective, how do you kind of push in to that narrative, that sense of whether it's fear or whether it's confusion, that people are questioning whether what restorative really means is less safety on campus? How do you push through that at this moment?
This is a big mic. Yeah, I wasn't sure. Okay.
Thank you for the question. I'm going to say pretty candidly, the first thing is to address the myth that restorative justice does not include the value of discipline, or that values of safety are not also the values that guide restorative work. I think oftentimes, even as you look at the research and you hear anecdotal, narratives, I think what I'm proud of for the department and for our RCLs is that we're approaching that conversation with authenticity and honesty,
Yeah.
right? And so we have to name it. Oftentimes, people hear restorative justice as a framework, and they might go towards trust, relationship, responsibility, and respect, which are all values that are phenomenal to name. When in our last session with our RCLs, I spoke pretty plainly, and I was pretty fired up in letting them know that my ask of them is that they also practice the value of courage when they are faced with comments that state that RJ is the reason why schools are not safe, right? Because what encompasses a restorative community isn't just going to be having restorative justice practices. We need other frameworks that complement RJ, like MTSS, social-emotional learning. Restorative justice, in my understanding of it, coming to our district, was not to say that our promising practices that we've implemented, that we have evidence that works, it doesn't say do away with them. If anything, lift up the framework of restorative justice and let it be a reminder to us that what value are we coming from, right? So I would say that a restorative community, it does take time. In my experience, you do not see changes shift until about year 3, even up to year 5. So one, it takes time, right? We have to be explicit in saying that when folks come to us and they say things like, RJ is the reason why we are unsafe, the first thing we do as restorative leaders is we first listen and seek to understand, why is that your perception? Please speak more to that. Because as a practitioner of having been introduced to this framework since 2008 in Oakland schools, I would say that restorative justice as a framework allows us to humanize each other and actually challenges us to look at our systems and look through a humanizing lens, even in systems work, which is challenging when oftentimes our systems are built to do exactly what they're doing now, is to have these disproportionalities. I don't know if I answered your question, but.
No, I think I appreciate it. I don't know if Ebony or John, if you wanted to jump in on that question. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I think it also just goes back to that whole idea of education. When I was a principal at Lincoln, when our district first started this work around restorative, our previous program manager, Felicia, kept coming to me saying, hey, I want to start doing some restorative work. And I thought it was just all about not holding kids accountable for their actions. But, I took her up on it, and I really saw how we could really start teaching the students who were actually responsible for, committing the harm, how they started to really understand, like, hey, this is how I'm impacting somebody else. However, I would still love them and still sometimes had to issue punishment. So again, I was just clueless in terms of like what the whole restorative idea was about. And like I said, a lot of times people think that, there is no, you don't hold kids accountable. So I think it goes back to a lot of education.
Ebony, I don't know if you had any further thoughts. Yeah.
I was just going to say, it's similar to what, I'm going to hop over here, similar to what Dr. Ferrer stated in the beginning. I think that the common misconception is that when we embrace restorative justice practices, we're leaving behind consequences, we're leaving behind justice, we're leaving behind discipline. And so I think Dr. Ferrer really articulated well kind of my ideas and belief around that, is that we need to provide forums and space for communication to clarify what is restorative justice practices and ensure people know that justice is part of the framework, that consequences, discipline is part of the framework of restorative justice practices. And I think part of the work that John had spoken to during the presentation around the revisions in our restorative discipline policy are around clarifying these pieces and making sure that anybody who gets their hand on that document is able to clearly see that the framework that we are practicing and the practices that we're sharing with our schools and our administrators are really rooted in restoration, but include consequences, discipline, and justice.
One just thought, you have two goals that you have laid out, keeping kids in school and reducing the racial disparities, especially among Black students with discipline. maybe what we should, be thinking about is a third goal, which is students and staff feel safe at school. And we know that the only way to get to that is through restorative practices. We can't create safety on school by going back to, I think what Raina, described as punitive practices. But I think if we hold ourselves accountable, and obviously students and staff feeling safe at school is bigger than your department. It's I think, what Michelle was saying about this is about the whole, the whole approach, the whole system. But I think if our restorative, the people who are focused on restorative justice added that as a third goal, I think it might open up, a conversation about what restorative means. So just a thought there.
John has already noted that, so I think that's a great addition, and that's definitely something, and kind of the play between emotional safety and physical safety is something that we talk about a lot and focus on.
Yeah.
So definitely adding that, and we'll come back to you with some updates on how we progress on that one.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
I just want to add one other point, and that was somebody inadvertently talked about systems and the working of systems. If you look at the previous presentation, one of them talked about the statistics of African American, and that's why we're lifting them up. Obviously, you could say that the system hasn't worked for them in the old context. And so, when you have them being treated in a way that most of the suspensions, expulsions, and obviously the system is not understanding and meeting the needs of that student population. So hopefully with RJPA, we can find ways, and this is what you're sounding like you're doing, can find ways to address it so that they feel a part of the system and not excluded as a part of the system. There's one's always isolated to say, well, you're being suspended more or expelled, or you're doing poorly on tests, or whatever it is, whatever the variable is, that you're the anomaly or you're the extreme outlier. So to me, that says that the system is not working for that group of students. And so it is upon us as educators, as the experts, to find ways to address those concerns, to bring them into the circles, to find out what their needs are so that we can address them.
Yes, a lot of the work that we do and that we aim to do is around supporting students through social emotional learning, providing strong MTSS as a framework, social emotional regulation and de-escalation and all of that. But when we look at this data and we see these disparities that are persistent over years and years and years, nationally, state, and locally, it speaks to the mindsets and values and beliefs and practices of adults, right? So we're not doing our job if we're not also focusing heavily on the way that adults are working with and next to and for young people. So that is a large focus of our work, as well as not just attending to the needs of students, but also attending to those mindsets, values, beliefs, and behaviors of the adults.
Trustee Pedersen?
Thank you. Thank you all. I think many of our best and brightest are on this, and I appreciate all of you here. I guess first I want to congratulate you on, there's always a temptation to leap into what isn't in a thing rather than to talk about what is, and so I want to start with what is. I appreciate, I think the goals and the outcomes are both, they're not only the right thing to do, they're stipulated by law. We're obligated to reduce disparity, and we know, I think all of us are aligned in understanding that expulsion is not a behaviorally effective intervention. Suspension is not a behaviorally effective intervention. Establishing a baseline that is worthy of restoring to is a primary goal, and then establishing a system that enables us to restore to that baseline that we've created is obviously inherently a worthy goal. And I think the reforms you've proposed are aligned with that. In particular, John, thank you for the reforms of the panel system. I think it's been in need of reform. I also want to bring up in particular the proposed reform, and I think this is coming back, right? This is coming back to us in in
Regularly.
January. Also, we talk a lot about this, certainly when I came on, there weren't a lot of instruments in the cockpit, to make data-informed decisions, which are going to be all the more necessary as we face some budget cuts in the future, and we need to understand what is effective. And so for me, the system that's being proposed to aggregate data on referrals, not just suspensions, but to actually start to get an idea of what the reality is beyond the suspensions and expulsions is really essential to this process of working as a board and a leadership team and staff and site leaders and teachers and other staff. What I would say is that the question of referral data kind of, in a way, starting from, you've been given the task to start from restorative discipline, and you've done it well, but in a way, starting from the question of discipline is kind of is upside down, because the question really is, discipline is not an end in itself. It's not like a service we provide because it's cool to be disciplined and we need to make sure it's fair. It is a means to an end. And to my mind, this is not a dissertation on it, but to my mind, broadly speaking, we are trying to create positive behavioral change through the discipline. And then, so we submit the question of discipline to, is it creating positive behavioral change? Both for the individual who may be at risk of being suspended or expelled, but also that positive behavioral change is good for their lives, it's good for their growth and their achievement, and their psychological, social, emotional well-being. But it's also good for their peers, it's good for their classrooms, their teachers, their sites. And so I guess for me, when we talk about the goals, this is where it really gets to me to a larger question of these goals and outcomes are focused on the characteristics of discipline. But ultimately, I would love to see goals that are focused on number one, the positive behavioral change that discipline is supposed to serve, and number two, the consequential changes in social emotional well-being, in reported. I mean, we have survey data we have data from teachers, anecdotal data that things are very challenging behaviorally. Sometimes we see it as in closed sessions, some of those challenges. We get it in our survey data from a large-scale survey data that there are safety concerns. And so what I would love to see are goals that are around, is there a decrease in behavioral issues, particularly ones that have negative consequences for targeted individuals? Is there an improvement in reported sense of safety, belonging, connection? And I mean, you can kind of think that through, but my ultimate concern is, by focusing just on the quality of the discipline, we lose track of what the larger goals discipline is intended to serve in our system. And I would love on return visits to start to see some of that data and analysis about, look, we did this, because honestly, if you employ a restorative system, and I have parents in my subdistrict frequently upset about restorative practices or justice, and I tell them, we honestly don't really have a restorative system yet. It's not, if you looked at the investment we've made out of our, nearly $2 billion budget, it's probably $10 million, that goes into restorative practices per se. So we're not there yet. But I do think that if we had the data to show, look, we implemented this thing, not only do we see a reduction in suspensions and expulsions, which we did by fiat because we said reduce it, but we actually saw positive behavioral change. We saw whole sites having a sense of safety and belonging. I would love to see that ultimate data.
Absolutely, and that's something that we talked about quite a bit, and you can speak to that too. But we talked about, sort of what to present here and what to share, and that's a data collection. So we're using this idea of a culture dashboard and looking at all of the schools within our system across the board. So not just things like the end result, that sort of suspension and expulsion and how that's coming up, but we're looking at things like tracking the circles that our schools are holding. So the schools that these people are at, and holding harm circles, community building circles, friendship circles. We're looking at attendance data. We're looking at those sort of positive monikers and those positive things that are indicating, the progress of the work that we're doing across each of those sort of factors. and being able to have a holistic view of the work that we're doing, and then seeing at that end point, how has that impacted suspension and expulsion. So we're definitely on that, and I wouldn't say we've fleshed that out entirely yet, but we've got our indicators set, and we're starting to build that out, because I think there's a lot of alignment here between our group and what you've shared.
Trustee Hazen.
Thank you, and just want to wholeheartedly agree with both Trustee Barrera and Pedersen. I was thinking very much along the same lines in terms of what is the real goal of this work, because the work is so important. And yes, we want to stop the school to prison pipeline. Yes, we want to address disproportionality, but exactly as both of you spoke to, there are some really positive outcomes we're looking for as well, not just stopping the negative ones. And so how do we start to think about and quantify those things? I don't have to reiterate because you all said it beautifully, but just want to share my support of that thinking. Also really appreciate that you shared the research as an attachment. So this is just a logistical thing, but encourage other staff for other presentations to provide us with that kind of information. You know, we're expected to be experts on a lot of topics, and so to provide us with the information to give us that expertise is really helpful. So appreciate that. And then I had some questions around the list of inputs that you shared, and I'm wondering if we can quantify any of them. And for me, I'm curious how systematically this list of 8 things is being implemented. Are we doing any of these things at scale, or are these 8 things happening just at a few sites or for a few students? So I'm really curious about that. And then, so I'm just looking at the list, right? So proactive restorative support, wellness rooms, like how widespread are all of those things?
Sure.
So if you can speak to that, and then I've got one final question.
Yeah, we can follow up with you too, because I don't know if this is going to be too long of an
Yeah,
answer for you, but I'll try to go through them quickly so that you have an idea. I think the ones that, let me get to that slide.
And I don't need specific numbers, I guess more is this happening in a few places, or are we
mix.
actually seeing this at the majority of, it sounds like secondary sites?
I would say it's a mix. I think the ones
I think it might
that-
take too long to go through every single one, but yeah, if you can just give like an
Yes,
overview.
I will not go through
Thank
every
you.
single one. But I would say they are not all at scale, and I think some of them only impact certain groups, so you'll see the entire group that it's meant to be impacted is impacted there. But a lot of the ones that are on here that we've kind of keyed in on are like number 1 and number 2. That is, as John said, for the proactive restorative discipline support to our sites. That's every administrator in our system, and that's something that goes out consistently 4 times over the course of the year. So that's something that's like whole site, whole system that we're sharing repeatedly over time. Updates and refinements to our restorative discipline plan, that's something that impacts our whole community, right? So not just our schools and administrators, but our students and our families and our community. So some of these are whole system pieces, and some of these are at specific targeted student groups or adult groups.
Thank you. And then the last thing I'm wondering about, so it sounds like a lot of this is focused on secondary sites because presumably that's where we see the most behavioral issues. And I am all about upstream interventions, and so wondering if we're focused or how we're focused on elementary sites. I know you spoke a little bit to sort of resource sharing, but are we really thinking about sort of strategically if we can do the work with young children that we will see fewer issues when they get to middle and high school, and how should we be doing more of that and in an environment where we're looking at limited dollars, but we all recognize how important this is, looking for some recommendations.
So while I don't have the data to share right now, I will say that the department has actually done majority of our customized PDs over time with our elementary school communities. And so while the RCLs are dedicated to our secondary schools, we actually track as a department the various supports we provide to all school communities, from the time we connect with them all the way to developing a site-based RJP journey in partnership with the school, and then we also address harm. So I think I can provide you all with some of, here's our snapshot data of the schools we have done intensive work over time. But also that as a department, as we look at our data across all the schools, but particularly to your question around elementary, we will start to look at the schools we have not connected with just yet, right? And what does it mean to actually focus our effort going into next spring and the following year in looking at which schools have we not actually connected with at all, right? So that we can be intentional about building capacity across other schools.
Yeah, and I think, moving forward, I'd love to know, do we believe, or are we seeing evidence that when we invest really intentionally in this work at elementary sites, we see that at the middle schools they're feeding into, do we see a better culture? Like, is there a correlation there, and what dosage is required, in the elementary schools to see the results we're hoping to see later on? So just food for thought for later.
Thank you, Trustee Hazen. And Trustee Catoriano.
Thank you. I want to first thank you for the fantastic presentation and all the comments around the beautiful work that you guys are doing. I mean, to hear the stories of the real people that are at the bottom of all this work is so inspirational. I remember it wasn't the first time, but a few months ago when we were going through the Restorative Discipline Handbook, and we were going through a brief overview, I brought up this idea. But I think the big thing with restorative justice, the way that I interpret it, is that it's not about punishment, it's about people, which is really important. And so when I think about that, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but that also means that when we think about people, it's a lot more work to restore and think about the complexity of a human being than just kicking them out of our schools. That requires time, that requires money, and most importantly, that requires people. And we have people here that are meaningfully changing the lives of so many students. So I want to take a second to thank them for that, and I appreciate that you took a second to thank them as well. I have worry, and you guys are the experts, so please feel free to say more, but I have worry what happens when we have great policies, but we don't have the people that's doing the great work, and systemically, we don't have the people to make sure those policies are being done well. When we don't have the people for that, I could see how a lot of these policies might not go the way that we intended it, and so I wonder, can you talk about systemically the people that's needed to make these changes as we move away from a punitive standpoint? Can you talk more about that and really speak about the people that's now going into these new practices?
Get off and I'll jump in. I'll start. Okay. All right. So, sorry, we're tag teaming here. But I think that's a great point. I think it's a great question. I think it's definitely something that we were discussing and considering. So the RDP, I think, is a great document. I think it's full of a lot of shifts and changes and things that needed to happen for our district. But I think back in 2020, when we pushed it out into the universe, there were a lot of things that were missing for schools to actually be able to implement that with fidelity. And so now that we're coming back to it and really thinking about, and working with our site leaders around what is needed to implement this, what you shared is exactly right. It's people, it's resources, it's time, it's the support. And so I think with our new folks that we have, our RCLs at all of our middle and high schools, I think that's going to show us, and this is just their first year, but I think that we're going to see a lot of positive shifts in the ability for our sites to actually not just implement the restorative practices as part of the policy, but I think also do the work of data tracking and looking at the impact at a site level and being able to come forward and share some of the exemplars, some of the best practices, some of the this did not work out and let's not ever do that again. So I think that putting people in place is going to be a great addition to the revisions and the work, and I think it's going to have the most impact from all of the things that we have on that list of 8 things. I think that's the thing that's going to be the tipping point for our restorative practice work.
And I really appreciate that. I think this input page is fascinating. I mean, I love my wellness room. the question remains of how effective is a wellness room when there's no one there inside to staff it. And so I would really, I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but I have so many questions about, again, I appreciate Trustee Hazen's question about what does the implementation of these look like, because that's the big question. I think we as a board are very much on the same page of where we want to go, and that question of are wellness rooms in place, staffed? Are our youth mentorship programs in place, and are they staffed? Those are the questions that I'm really having, because we have goals, and I want to learn more about the processes and the implementation of them. So,
first and foremost, I want to say thank you. You started with a very clear expectation that you were reporting out on student outcomes focused governance. And I don't want us to lose sight of that. The intention behind reports are to show progress over time, and I am not going to suggest that trying to monitor and measure everything is going to lead to the outcomes we desire. We need to get very clear with what we are aiming for as a goal, and be very clear as a board, because I'm hearing a number of expectations outside of what we designed the presentation for. So I want us to be clear so that we can be clear with staff. We have so many things that we're implementing. To Trustee Quitoriano's point, we don't want to get into the weeds. So as a board, we need to be very clear with our goals, our outcomes, right? And then I'm going to expect staff to lead this work and report back out so that the board can actually do their work of making decisions around how we're funding, where we're focused, which schools. And so I just want to say thank you because it was very clear, very aligned. I like the background, the data, and then the very clear data that you are tracking. Because what can get lost is the fact that we have black students who are disproportionately disciplined and suspended. And I am not going to apologize for the fact that we're going to focus on ensuring that. I do agree with Trustee Pedersen that that's not what we're chasing. We should be chasing the fact that we're creating conditions for students to belong, our black students, our brown students, that they have voice, that they are seen, that they are heard, that they can thrive, and that we see the brilliance in them. So I just want to encourage us that we're articulating, I want to say I heard more than 5 things. The team reported on a couple of things. Now we're into 7, 8, and we can get lost. And so I want to encourage us as a community to be really clear. And I agree, we shouldn't be chasing outcomes, to your point. As Raina said, districts, systems have been chasing those things. And so we have to think about, what do we want? How do we implement? How do we gain the information that it's actually working? To Trustee Hazen's point, and how do we get better? So I just want to lift that up. As we are getting clearer, it's going to help staff get clear as well.
Well, I just hope to finish this out because I know we spent a lot of time. Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. And I just want to shine light on that. The restorative justice practices really do help impact our new generation in society, and I notice it as a student and see it within my peers. I just want to shine light also on the fact that when I think of restorative justice, I think of support systems, and expanding on that, I define that as trusted adults, better known as mentors. I noticed in your inputs, you put youth mentorship programs, and I want to just shine light on that and not necessarily get too deep into it. But I was wondering on how can students get access into getting more mentorships and kind of connecting with more adults to decrease those rates of suspensions, because I think before we get to the issue, we could stop it by just having a supported adult on campus.
Thank you. So right now, our youth mentorship program is focused specifically on students at Alba who are experiencing expulsion. We have had a lot of questions and interest, so it's like on a volunteer basis by our adult staff, our central office staff. But since we started that program, it's relatively small. But we've had a lot of interest from students who are like, can I peer mentor, can I do this? Or adults who, like, we don't have enough students, which is a great problem to have, not enough students for you to mentor in that particular space. But how can we get connected with students at some of our other spaces? So definitely something we're thinking about, and thank you for lifting that.
Trustee Quatorian.
I just want to thank Superintendent Jackson for that comment. And I apologize for getting too much into the weeds. I think sometimes when we think about the discussions that I'm included on sometimes, especially around labor, I'm not included on a lot of them. And so I have a lot of questions that I can't have answered. And so they come out here, and so I appreciate that. But again, I 100% thank you. You're clear on the goals, you're clear on the outcomes, you're clear where we want to be and where we are right now, and there's progress, which I really appreciate, so thank you.
I just wanted to finish off by also saying thank you to the group, thank you to our speakers. Did we have one more?
I just want to reiterate something in response. I think the superintendent's right to narrow it down, but I want to reiterate the goals I see here are process goals, but ultimately the goal of getting discipline right is safer students, safer campuses, greater sense of belonging, reduction in assaults, reduction in threats, reduction in the kinds of disruption that make it difficult for students to pursue social emotional well-being, belonging, academic achievement. So for me, I really think it is important, and I think we've all sort of echoed it, we need goals that speak to the ultimate function of discipline, because otherwise we just get discipline gone, let's get rid of it. I hate it, it's a bad service. Unless it serves a function, which is to create positive behavioral change and ultimately safer campuses, campuses that have a greater sense of belonging. When we do a survey, we see students say, I feel safe on this campus, I feel loved on this campus, I feel like I belong. And honestly, if we don't get that, then however good we got the service of discipline, we failed. Because the ultimate goal has to be safety and well-being and belonging and ultimately achievement and a sense of purpose and all the other subsidiary goals we have. But we have to get the real world consequences of the discipline system right. I think that's the ultimate goal.
And I think it goes beyond that. You're hitting on the surface of safe, whatever. But for me, sitting here, knowing that the victims in this system, the number one victim is the African-American child. That is the victim that shows up on every statistic that you talk about. So the safe environment and all of that, people see them as the threat and they're suspending them. The outcome is there for a reason. The system has consistently failed them from day one in every aspect, even if you start digging with special education. Some of those children are labeled special needs children because the teachers don't want to deal with them. They feel threatened by them. So for me, when I say you need to look at what's happening with the African-American children, it tells me like a neon sign, something is wrong in the system and we need to figure out what it is. And that then will help all the children in the system on every dimension. But I'm not going to just, we get what's happening here and there and whatever. We've got to go back and ask, why is the system failing? What is happening to those children? And I bet you it's replicated not just only in the African-American children. There are some students on the periphery who are following the same pattern. But when it all comes together for African-American children, it's just flashing red light. Something is wrong here in this system on every level.
And
that's what I'm saying.
And I agree. I think for us, and what I'm encouraging us is not to chase all the data points. If we're saying that we're creating the conditions for our students to thrive, we need to make sure that we're creating conditions for our Black children to thrive. And so you're actually, all I'm asking is that we don't have too many things we're chasing, that we get to the root cause and we design the conditions that we want. One of our core values is belonging. And we know that when children belong, all of our children, they thrive at greater levels. And if you identify students who don't feel like they belong, they're going to act out in a way that brings some attention to them, and we have to pull up next to them. So I actually say that we're all saying the same things, and I'm encouraging us not to get too far away from that and go back to the foundation. Thank you, President.
Thank you, yeah, and I'd just like to wrap up by also sharing that the time I spent as in PTA, my daughters graduated in 2015, 2018 from Mira Mesa High School. I remember us talking about this back then, and the parents being like, what is this work we're doing? So I feel like we've really come such a far way from, where we started. And also, as Dr. Jackson mentioned, I think I'm hearing a general trend from the group is what the focus that we want to see is what's working, what's really working for our students. How can we really focus on the African-American students and, continue this trend, but really trying to zero in on specifically what we need to focus on. And lastly, I just wanted to ask if in this work, the schools that are the RJP, the people who are doing this work across schools, do they have conversations about, hey, we're doing this over at the Hoover cluster, and this is working great, and how is your wellness program working at your school, or whatever it is, so that they can replicate, and are we taking the people that are maybe stronger and, really successful in this work? Of course, it's going to be different at every school site and every cluster because they're all different, but what are we doing there in terms of best practices and just allowing our staff and our students as well to speak about this work and be able to work at the district level so they're not just in the silos within their cluster or within their own school?
I would say that the restorative community leads who are meeting monthly are organically having those conversations. We also structure at every session collaborative time. We've invited RJ coordinators, specifically at Lincoln High School, at Knox, to share a day in the life and to share that it does take time to do this work, and all the kind of first year wonderings, challenges, but also ahas that our RCLs are facing is actually perfectly on time. Right? So when they are feeling uncertain, when they're feeling like they're up against the myths that are coming up from their school communities, right? Also alongside what's happening, and I appreciate the RCLs that shared, they are also looking at systems. And so I think what the RCL sessions have provided is an opportunity, one, for secondary leaders to see each other, to meet each other. I have told them very candidly, you do not need my permission or our permission to work collaboratively. And so what I really appreciate and honor about just that space we are piloting this first year is, one, I think it's leading, I would say, levels of trust are happening between us as the central office and our school communities, right? In my experience, sometimes we enter schools and there's always this feeling of being othered as, oh, you're the district. And what I am proud to share, and I hope that more RCLs are able to not only just be in front of you, but share their narrative, is that there are things that are happening and that are creating spaces to thrive, and that they are not being shy to share those resources. That it isn't about competing with like, well, my school has this and my system is working. We're encouraging our leaders, right, to share those things. You do not have to design by yourself. And so I think strongly that the opportunity that having these leaders, this pilot, this first year, is creating real experiences of true collaboration and designing.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Ebony, Michelle, and John. That was a very insightful discussion, and we appreciate you. Okay, we will now consider board consent agenda items F1 through F3. Do we have a motion on items F1 through F3? Motion on the item. Okay, thank you, Trustee Hasten. Someone's listening. Do we have a second? Thank you, Trustee Lavender Williams. Let's see, we don't have any speakers, so we're just going to go right to a vote. Oh, we have one question, Shayna. Or, sorry, Trustee Hazen.
Thank you, thank you. So I am a strong, fervent supporter of community schools, but I'm looking for a little clarification on the community schools resolution. I was trying to understand what precipitated it and what we hope will be different as a result.
Yeah, I can jump in on that. So we know that the community schools grant, currently it's a 5-year grant, and it provides for funding for a community schools coordinator, but then additional funding to a school to access services, develop, support strategies. And then that portion of the money goes away, according to the grant. We also know that the portion on top of the community schools coordinator, right? And then we also know that, we're in this, budgetary situation in California, and is there going to continue to be the investment both from the state and from the federal government in community schools, all of which potentially leads a school community to say, I'm not sure we should apply for the community schools grant because we don't want to start something and then have it go away. And the purpose of the resolution is to affirm our commitment as a district to the community schools program and basically encourage that if you feel your school is ready to go through the process and apply and hopefully become a community school, we want to encourage you to do it. And don't sort of assume right now that it's a temporary program that may go away. In fact, assume that this is something that is core to what we believe in as a district, and we're going to figure out how to provide that support, and we're going to continue to advocate at the state and federal level for investment in community schools. So it's meant that the timing for applications is coming up, and the point of this resolution right now is to encourage schools and school communities to go through the process and apply.
All right, thank you.
I guess I'm wondering, is there a call to action? I'm wondering if it goes far enough then to call on staff or the Community School Steering Committee to share that information, right? Exactly what you just said. Is that, in looking, it's not made explicit here, but maybe it's implicit.
I think from a process standpoint, resolutions should not direct. And so that would be a matter that two trustees could get together, the board would agree, and then provide that to the superintendent for direction, but a resolution shouldn't do that. Just a process standpoint. So it is likely missing that because that's not the intention of a resolution.
All right, we will go to a vote. Let's start with.
You have a speaker now, Kyle Weinberg.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just signed up.
Kyle.
So we need to talk about what that looks like.
Hi, Kyle Weinberg, President, San Diego Education Association, union for over 6,000 educators within our district, and wanted to commend the board for taking up this resolution today. You all led the way in 2020, passing the first community schools resolution that set our process in motion as a district, that established our community schools steering committee. We've now developed an application process as a community schools steering committee to make sure that our highest need school communities are getting the resources and practices that they need to combat to promote racial justice, and also to get everyone involved in our school communities, our educators, our classified staff, parents, students, and administrators to collaborate on problem solving through our needs assessment process. We've blazed a trail on the application process, having to have to demonstrate that commitment ahead of time as a school community to even be considered to be designated as a community school. We've now enshrined that in our SDA contract, that our site governance teams are key decision makers in guiding the community schools problem-solving process, and appreciate that partnership with the board on leading on this so that we continue to be the flagship community schools district, not just in the county, not just in the state, but really nationally on collaborative leadership.
Thank you, Kyle. All right, let's go ahead and vote. We have Trustee Lavender Williams.
Aye.
Trustee Catoriano.
Aye.
Okay, everyone else? Okay, that passes unanimously with the student board members concurring. And let's see. Sorry, we are on items F1 through F3. Just did those. Okay, thank you. Sorry. All right, we're going to move up to operational items G1 through G5. Do we have a motion on items G1 through G5? Trustee Lavender Williams made that motion, and Dr. Whitehurst Payne seconded that. And do we have any speakers on that item? Oh, okay. Is that Leah? Leah. We have our former
Hi, can you hear me?
trustee board member on the phone with us, or on Zoom with us.
Perfect. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful. Good evening, Superintendent Jackson, members of the board, and esteemed staff and students. It is wonderful to see you all this evening. My name is Leah Nepomuceno, and I am a former school board member of this great district, speaking on behalf of me and fellow former member Zachary Patterson. It brings us great delight to speak in support of item G2, approval of student member compensation and elective course credit. This item plays a key role in aligning the quality of opportunity for students to run for and maintain the role of student board member without the barrier of financial restrictions. As former members, we know firsthand the hours of dedication this role entails, and applaud Trustee Lavender Williams and Trustee Catoriano for their current commitment to uplifting the voices of SDUSD students, all while balancing their studies. I relate to them, especially right now as I am dialing in this call at approximately 10:10 p.m. my time on finals week. Zachary couldn't make this call, but sent a statement of support as well, as he is also studying for finals. But we make these sacrifices because we believe in the work. We believe in equal access for all students. We believe that finances shouldn't impede a student's desire to serve on their school board. And we believe that G2 is the difference between access for some and access for all. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Leah. It's nice to hear your voice. Okay, do any other trustees have questions or wish to discuss this item? Trustee Catoriano.
When I was thinking about what I was going to say about this, I genuinely can't express how grateful I am and I was to see it finally make its way on the agenda. It has been a humongously long fight spanning 4 student board members here within San Diego Unified. It's been a long, long journey. When I reflect about how much work I put into this job, I think, well, it's not really my work because my work is school, but really this job is my life. And so when we think about work-life balance, it's a little up in the air. I'm so grateful that my work is finally being financially recognized with the amount of time that I pour into this job. I've grown really, really tired of the free Vaughn's cold-cut sandwiches that I can buy with my EBT card and my food stamps, and to finally have access to real food. It's been a long journey to get this far, and we have so much longer to go. I'm excluded out of so many conversations that are so important to running this school district. And as you'll see at the very end of this meeting, I'm excluded from important votes, even about this own board. That doesn't stop me from the great work that I'm doing, and I'm so glad to have a great opportunity to have my work financially recognized. But it's clear that the way that we treat students in our school district is so, so different and prejudiced from the way that we treat adults. I'm so glad, and I'd like to thank Assemblymember Ward, the National Student Board Member Association for the work that they've put in around this bill. But I know that other states have given so much power and enfranchisement to students, and there's ways that we can do the same, and I'm so proud that this is the first step in that process. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Cotoriano. Trustee Lavender Williams.
Okay, wait, sometimes it goes out. Let me scoot up. Okay, can everyone hear me? I want to say thank you for my amazing board for supporting this bill. I want to say thank you to Assemblymember Chris Ward, Stacy, Sierra Cook, and my fellow student board members Zachary, Matthew, and Leah. When I first heard of student board member, all I thought was disadvantage. Another disadvantage held by a financial barrier. I never thought going to Sacramento and speaking on this bill would turn into me sitting on this dais. But after 10 hours with Stacy and Leah, they definitely had other ideas. I'm proud to say today on this board, we are breaking that financial barrier for students from all financial barrier from all financial backgrounds. Thank you once again to everyone who supported this bill, and thank you to itself for being the first impression of my journey of Board of Education. I'm forever grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Lavender Williams. Yes.
This isn't about being paid. I've got that spiel out. We're good now. I'd just like to highlight really quickly, as we readopt our administrative procedures and board policies for the next year, I'd like to highlight a concern that a fellow constituent brought up to me in our last student advisory board meeting about inclusive language in a lot of our board policies, and how many of our board policies are, first, inaccessible to read. It's a very long journey to actually find the updated language, but also that many of the language uses terms like she or he or him, or she or him. And as a result, it's not very inclusive to all students, and that may not fit into that gender binary, so I'd just like to highlight that. Thank you.
Thank you for adding that. Anyone else? All right, we're going to go ahead. Wait, we need to vote on this. Okay, let's go ahead and start with Trustee Lavender Williams.
Aye.
And Trustee Cotoriano.
Aye.
And everyone else. All right, motion passes unanimously. Yay, student board members are concurring.
We need to vote again. I didn't see
Sharon, we need your light.
I'm going to clear it and start.
Oh, we're going to do it one more time. Okay, so we did the students. There she is. Okay, beautiful. We're all there now. All right. Yay. It's awesome. Very exciting. All right. Now we're going to consider items H3, first interim financial report, and item H4, report on final costs and issuance of general obligation bonds. Superintendent Jackson, please introduce item H3, and there is no staff presentation on item H4.
Thank you, President Bozzo. This evening, we have a presentation, as you mentioned, on the first interim report. This is for your review and approval. And we have Jody here, Jody McCullis and Drew Rollins, who will be sharing the presentation. And I imagine that the RJ presentation was much more exciting, so don't be offended if it doesn't go as long.
Well, first of all, we have to get to the right presentation. Help. There we go. Thank you. Good evening. Let me get through here. Tonight, Ms. McAllis and I would like to make the first interim presentation, a little bit of background on what it is. It's our actual finances for this year through October, and with the information as we know it now, projections for the following 2 years, which do show some shortfalls. We'll show solutions that we are proposing for 24-25, and then we also need board approval on the arts, music, and instructional materials discretionary block grant that we'll touch on. This is our budget wheel, our cycle of the budget process, just highlighting December, we're here. You already heard from our audit team earlier in the meeting, and then in January, we have the governor's budget, as well as a board workshop on budget, and then in February, another follow-on budget workshop. Just to provide some background on our fund data, here you see our revenue for the district. By all fund type, $2.8 billion. This is general fund. As you can see, makes up the majority of it, and the other pots of money. Continuing to drill down, you'll see the general fund, both restricted and unrestricted, totaling $1.9 billion. See the mix of federal and state money as the money is provided to us. Going a little further, this is just our general fund unrestricted. This slide and the next slide show our current year general fund unrestricted expenditures. This slide is expenditures by function. As you can see, we tried to categorize by these functions, and you can see that 85%, the items above the first solid line there, are direct support to students. 15% remaining, physical plant operations, miscellaneous, and business and central administration. And I would even say if we could do it, that line above physical plant operations should be blurred as we try to figure these things out. But it includes our custodial component in there, which has nearly 500 staff members at school sites. Other things captured in that line are things like our utility bill. Looking at the same pot of money, the general fund unrestricted, in our typical format of our objects in our typical accounting structure. And I think the thing to note here is that of our $1.1 billion of general fund unrestricted expenditure, 93% of that money is spent on personnel, certificated salaries, classified salaries, and benefits. We're in the middle of the budgeting process, and I want to just share a little bit of that. You've seen this before, and we are keeping this at the forefront. As we work through our budgeting process, our priorities are grounded in our areas of focus: mental health and wellness, support for the whole child, broad and challenging curriculum, staffing and development, all supported by that asset-based data system. And as it should be, this continues to be a team effort. This is not just a financial exercise carried out by Jody's team. This is cross-functional teams gathering together, include our area superintendents and other instructional leaders, and as well as operational leaders, working together with these tenets of prioritizing the classroom, being together in our collective responsibility, and doing all that we do with humanity. Again, going back to that previous slide where you saw 93% of our general fund expenditure is people. So it's a big part of what we do. I'm going to hand off to Jody to get into the budget details in a little more, budget in a little more detail. Here you go. You want to drive?
Okay, thank you. So as we develop our budget, there's several planning factors that are used, and, oops, there we go. And then just some examples is our projected cost of living, or COLA, also any potential salary increases, and then we also look at any changes in our pension rates as well. Our general fund unrestricted balance, we have a balanced budget for 23-24 that we'd like to highlight. And then for 24-25, we're also working on solutions to solve for a $70 million shortfall. And once we solve those, then we will have an ending balance of $49.4 million, which is sufficient enough to meet our required reserves. And then something to note is that change can happen, and it usually does happen. And so between now and March, we will be paying close attention to possible shifts, and we will make adjustments to our projections, which will be reflected in the second interim report that will be presented in March. Yep.
And then when we look at our shortfall, We've been working on a number of approaches, as you can see in the ring around our number there, $70.1 million of general fund, in providing solutions. These are a combination of one-time and ongoing solutions that we know will bring us and it provides a plan and a method to resolve that same shortfall. Back to you, Jody.
Okay. And then just as a reminder, over the last few years, we've received over $780 million in one-time COVID-related funding. And that funding expires in September of '24. And then as Drew mentioned on the previous slide, we do have a shortfall of $70 million, but we have been working together as a team to set our priorities and to solve for that shortfall. And then another source of one-time funding that the district has received is the Arts and Music and Instructional Materials Discretionary Block Grant. And it's, the uses of this funding is very broad, and our proposal is that these funds be spent on operational costs in areas that we continually see increases. And then lastly, our recommendation is that we're asking the board to approve the first interim report, certifying that the district's projected financial outlook is positive, and to approve the proposed plan for the Arts, Music, and Instructional Materials Discretionary Block Grant. And then if there's any questions.
Thank you, and I don't think we have any speakers on this item? No, okay. Trustee Pedersen.
Just to be clear, you're confident that with the solution proposed, we can confront and solve the $70.1 million shortfall? Good, thank you.
Questions over here? Trustee Whitehurst Payne?
Can you just explain to the arts and music people a little bit about that grant? And it's not supplanting or anything like that, but just give us a little bit info on that.
Sure. So what this is different than the Prop 28 funds. This is a block grant that, again, is one-time funding, very broad in the uses, and because it does say discretionary, so we are planning on using it, again, to help offset some of the increases in costs. And there's no supplanting or supplemental issues with it.
Trustee Hazen?
I first want to thank staff. Thank you for building in these two workshops that we're going to be having in January and February. I know we sort of quickly went through the wheel and where we are, but I think from a process standpoint, as we look at, to Trustee Pedersen's point, coming up with $70 million in solutions, or I think resolution says reductions, being able to work collectively and to take the time and space to do that work, I really appreciate. So thank you for that and for adding that to this process and for rooting all the work in what we want to be able to do for students. So thank you for those shifts.
Anyone else? Okay. Let's see. Are we voting on this one? Sorry, I lost my place. H3 and 4, thank you. Sorry, I was on the same page. Okay. Thank you, Trustee Whitehurst Payne. And do we have a second? Okay, Trustee Hazen. Okay, we'll start with students. Trustee Catoriano.
Aye.
And Trustee Lavender Williams.
Aye.
Okay, and all others? Okay, thank you. That passes unanimously with student board members concurring. We will now consider items I-1 through I-74, the superintendent's consent agenda. The following items were previously withdrawn by staff: I-7, I-19, I-48, I-66, I-71, and I-73. Do I have a motion on items I-1 through I-74? Motion by Trustee Barrera. Do we have a second? Motion, or second by trustee Catoriano. I think I saw your hand up. Okay, no speakers on this. We're going to go ahead and vote. We'll start with trustee Lavender Williams.
Aye.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, trustee Hazen.
Thank you. Just a quick one. So in looking through all of these items, I noticed we're continuing to support work around the DEMI. And I'm wondering if, as this work continues, if we can receive more information around correlation of the DEMI to the FAST and CASP as we're working to really understand what students know and can do.
Yes, we can.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for that clarification. Okay, go ahead.
Aye.
Thank you, trustee Catoriano.
Aye.
Okay, everyone else? Thank you, and that motion passes unanimously with our student board members concurring. And now we are at the non-agenda public testimony section. Let's see, we have, let me get down there. Sorry, I see, I don't think we have any virtual. They're all in person? Oh, there are some virtual, sorry, I didn't scroll down far enough. Okay, so it looks like we have 4 in person who are going to have 3 minutes, and then we have 3 virtual. All right, so let's go ahead. Again, I'm going to bring down to the front Carrie Longley, Lauren Mayers, Miles Timpson, and Izzy Martinez are for in person. So if you are here, make your way down to the front, and we will get started with Carrie if she is available. She's our first contestant this evening. And again, you have 3 minutes.
Good evening. Well, thank you so much, and thank you, everybody, for what you do to try to make us employees, you know, feel welcome here, and all the improvements that have been made lately. Today, I would like to say my name is Carrie Longley, and I have been loyally working for the San Diego Unified School District since 1991. I currently work as a health tech at Wegeforth Elementary. I want to share a concern that I have. It is my observation from talking with other health techs that a large quantity of us are increasingly becoming disgruntled towards both the Department of Nursing and Wellness and our para-union. I understand the rising tension is due to the fact that the PIFs got their assignment increased to 7 hours per day. Frankly, we health technicians feel slighted and gypped. We were under the impression that the long-time negotiations were to include us health techs getting our hours increased to 7 hours per day as well. I have been told by Nursing and Wellness to get involved with the union, particularly this July when I received a phone call notifying me that my 5-day assignment at Kearney had been eliminated and that there was a hiring freeze on health techs. I am involved with the union. I currently volunteer as treasurer, but am not on the negotiating team. I have been reassured, though, by our union's negotiating team that they were and have been advocating for us health techs, but the district said no to including us in the increasing of hours to 7 a day. We as health techs do work very hard, and it is extremely difficult for most of us to accomplish all our work and still get our breaks and lunch. I want to emphatically ask why you, our district, has declined the health techs the opportunity to increase our hours to 7 per day. Let's see. Please share your answer with all of us health techs when you come up with it. and I did send you all an email as well so that you have time to review it, but anything you want to say for now, or did it catch you off guard?
Yeah, thank you. We can't respond to public testimony, but thank you for sharing your
Okay. Thank you.
feedback. Thank you. Okay, then we have Lauren Mertz.
Hi, good evening. My name is Lauren, she, her. This is Cassidy. We work together. I'm a speech language pathologist and have been a SDSU employee for 6 years. But today I come to you as a mother, a new mother, a community member, and a human. I, like many, work here for more than a paycheck. I pour my heart into my students, and I'm a proud member of the team I'm on. They're really my family. And I don't do things like this. I'm like quivering, and I try to lead by example, just quiet and gentle, perseverance. And when it comes to social justice issues like world affairs, COVID, school shootings, the war in Ukraine, BLM, especially with those with children, you've spoken and sent us emails, and you may not have realized it, but those emails were safety. They felt like a gentle hug and permission. So we look to you for guidance, and I'm just wondering, I know you can't respond, but it's a thought. Where are those follow-up emails now that things have gotten so much worse in Palestine? I wouldn't be advocating fully for our children in my school's microcosm if I failed to address what's going on to children in the world. We're witnessing a genocide. Kids are being denied an education because their schools are being blown up. Their books are being reduced to ashes and their teachers killed, and children are being starved, dismembered, disabled, orphaned, traumatized, killed. Right now, like right now. Attacks on them are attacks on our own students and our educators. So we just need the safety and solidarity from you and resources, and you've provided resources about war, how to teach, but what about genocide? How do I come to work every day and leave my daughter at home as babies and moms are being killed at horrifying rates? There needs to be pressure for a ceasefire and continued protection against anti-Semitism, Islamophobia from you, one of the biggest school districts in America. I don't know what else to say, but I'm happy to be here surrounded by advocates, passionate people, thinkers, and this just felt like my safest option, along with Cassidy, who decided to come with me today so gracefully. So everything you presented here tonight is important, but this is urgent and critical. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Miles Timpson.
Good evening, members of the board, Sharon, Richard, Sabrina, Shayna, and Cody, and Superintendent Lamont, Miles Timpson, math teacher, wanted to get in front of you and remind you of the need to put personal finance in our math courses. I'm going to focus my time today on taxes. There are few things certain in this world. Everyone in this room can take as fact: death, taxes, and this board being slow. Last year, somebody fraudulently filed taxes in my name. I'll save you the details and just say, please try not to have employee social security numbers stolen again. Whether you go to college or not, everyone needs to file taxes every year, and we don't teach it. I suggest in middle school math, we introduce students to Form 1040. In high school math, we add on Schedules 1, 3, A, B, and D, and in advanced math, Schedule C and Form 1120. My argument is this would be more useful to students than a lot of the content in the current math curriculum. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Miles. And next is Izzy Martinez.
Hello, board members, Dr. Lamont Jackson, staff. I'm here to hold accountability. I am the president of CSCA Paraeducators Chapter 759. We negotiated in good faith over position descriptions that one either needed updating or the creation of new positions that are so vital to the students here in San Diego Unified. And we were hoping, because we've ratified just under a month ago and shared the approval of said ratification, we were hoping that that agenda item would be on the agenda today. and it's not. And that was due to an oversight on adding the fiscal component, the finances part, to said item. But I repeat, it's been just under a month, and an oversight happened. And so where I could understand mistakes happen and maybe something didn't get passed on appropriately, it's still harm. And it's harm to some folks that have been through the ringer for at least 7 years, saying, hey, I'm being overlooked. Hey, there's something wrong. Hey, I am not being valued. And so now they have an opportunity to actually have their value be looked at with valid compensation, and now they have to wait yet another month. I do want to express the level of transparency and follow-through to just bring up this item to me from the Senior Executive Director of Human Resources, Kristen Morshead. I appreciate that. That is something brand new. So I do commend the striving for change and transparency, and even just the follow through from all the people that are so visibly upset over the oversight happening. But I'm bringing this up to your attention because it's still causing harm. It's still delaying the need that people have. And it adds another tack on, yet again, I'm overlooked. Yet again, I'm being dismissed. Even though it was not intentional, even though it's just the way the processes are, it's now they're thinking, oh, well, it's okay, the district doesn't care about me anymore, when that's not true. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, now we have two individuals on Zoom. Apparently we have Sumaya Maximud first. Is Sumaya with us? All right. Oh, okay. Sumaya, can you unmute yourself, please? You'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go right ahead.
Hi, my name is Sumaya Mahmood, and I am an advocacy specialist with Somali Family Services. And I'm joining you today to advocate for the inclusion of the Middle Eastern and North African population on enrollment forms for our schools. As a former student in this school district and member of this community, I believe it is essential that our enrollment forms accurately reflect the diversity California has with a population of 400,000 Arab Americans. Recognizing the MENA population on enrollment forms can help tailor educational programs, resources, and support services to better address this community. We need this even more with everything happening in the world today that is creating a huge need for support services against hate crimes and discriminations that we are seeing happening in youth within our school district. But the question becomes, how can the district offer these services if the students in need of it are not being accurately counted for? I urge San Diego Unified School District Board to work towards the implementation of a more inclusive enrollment form with a MENA option to help foster a school environment that embraces the unique identities of all our students. We are open to further communication. I have sent an email out to all of you guys to speak further on this. Thank you so much for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Samaya. And lastly, it looks like we have Kristen Schwartz. Is Kristen with us? Okay, Kristen, can you please unmute? Kristen, are you there? Okay. Please unmute if you can hear me. No? Okay. Going once, going twice? Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and stop there. Okay, we tried. Thank you all for providing your comments to the board and superintendent today, and we appreciate your input. Please know that your perspectives help us to better serve our students, our parents, and our communities. This concludes the agendized business of the board. We will now conduct our annual Organization of the Board of Education election of board president and vice president pursuant to Education Code Section 35143. And I'm going to now turn it over to Ms. Stoltz, who's going to lead us in this action.
Yes, we will now consider nominations. Is there a nomination for president?
I'd like to nominate Vice President Shayna Hazen to be our president.
And I'll second that. Can I?
And I will distribute the votes, the ballots. And it is a unanimous vote for District B, Shayna Hazen for president. Is there a nomination for vice president?
I nominate Cody Pedersen for vice president.
Is there a second on the nomination? Sharon? And I will distribute the ballots for vice president.
Can I just contrast our process with the election?
I was going to say.
Yeah. Well, how about city council?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Easy. We're still live, we're still live. No.
Just stating.
Marty says I can say something before I turn my ballot in. I want to thank Sabrina also, and I do appreciate what you said, Dr. Jackson, earlier. You came through like a star, and we watched you grow in this position, and I want to say thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Whitehurst-Payne, and thanks to all of you again for your support this year, and it's been such a pleasure being in this position, but I'm also very happy to hand it off. I also wanted to just share that I like the way that we are very comfortable on this board to not feel like we have to have that power and hold on to one position, because it's really not about, to me, who's in this chair. It's about this group as a whole. So whoever it is, regardless, I feel like we as a whole are very good at working together and kind of handing that off to different individuals, so we all have an opportunity to experience being president, which is incredible and a lot of fun, but it's a lot of work too. But I do enjoy that we all work together as a team, so it's not just about that one individual. It really is, you know, work of all of us that makes it happen, so.
And the official vote, it's unanimous vote for District C, Cody Pedersen for Vice President.
Okay, so I think I turn this over to the new president. Okay, sorry for my, I was like, hopefully you don't have to sit here because it's all messy, but, okay, right there.
Thank you. The next regular meeting will be held
Am I allowed to make a comment?
in the new year on January 9th, 2024. But before we adjourn, we have one final comment.
I'd just like to take a quick second and thank how much smoother of a process this went compared to last year of us going back and forth with Andra about the legality of student board members. So I appreciate the guidance that Marty and Andra gave me about what a student board member's vote looks like with this process. But I also want to point out something really interesting and be really clear here that my vote did not matter in any sense, not even in a preferential sense, because I voted at the same time as everyone else. And my votes were not counted in that way. I had no say in this election. And that's why I felt uncomfortable voting. And I thought about abstaining. I didn't, but I thought about it. The other thing to think about is that I am not allowed to run as an officer position. I have no intention to. But the fact that I'm not allowed to testifies to the prejudice that student board members face every day. In fact, some school districts in Maryland allow student board members to run, and in Maryland there is a student board member who's currently serving on their school district as their vice president. There's a way to make it happen, and the fact that we as a school district and we as a state don't allow that really says something about how we treat our student board members, not just in governance, but across our school districts. Thank you.
Thank you for the feedback and reminding us we can always do better. And with that, we will adjourn until the new year.
Congrats.